What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to my channel, Movie Files, and happy MCU, the Falcon and Winter Soldier Friday to you all. I am so excited to be breaking down this third episode, which was titled Power Broker, and I was really excited for this episode because I found out that the writer of this episode is Derek Kolstad, who is the writer of all three John Wick films and more recently the Nobody film with Bob Odenkirk. And I have a John Wick theory that I'm going to share with you all at the end of this video, but we got so much to break down, the spoiler discussion. I'm so excited to be here, but before we dive into it, make sure you're following me on all my other social media accounts, which you can find those links in the description below. If you are new to the channel, welcome to the community. Consider subscribing to the channel, and while you all are at it, make sure you hit the notification bell. That way you can get the alert for when I drop new content. It would mean a lot to me if you all can like and share this spoiler review of the Falcon and Winter Soldier. It helps out the channel a lot, but I also appreciate all the support. And in the comments below, let's discuss this third episode, your pros, your cons. Zemo dancing in the club. We got Sharon Carter back. We have more of the Flag Smashers, and there's some more super soldier serum that they have in their possession. And let me know who you guys think the power broker will be. We're going to break it all down and have a great discussion, but let's have it in the comments below. So before I jump into my recap and my breakdown, as we always do, we like to plug the live stream that we do every single Saturday after the Falcon and Winter Soldier. Myself and my amazing co-host, we may have a special guest, we'll see, but nonetheless, it's such a great discussion that we have every single week, breaking down the meaning behind certain scenes, the theories, the Easter eggs, and just a great discussion that we have every single Saturday here at Movie Files. We'll see you there tomorrow discussing this very episode. So let's get into this recap as the episode opens up with the GRC commercial, which is Reset, Rebuild, Restore commercial. Cut to seeing John Walker on a mission to Germany as he's going to ramshack the people that we met last week that were housing the Flag Smashers, and we see John Walker get spat on, and we see more of this, less of a good man becoming more of the guy that just wants to get the mission done no matter what it takes. Again, we're seeing a little bit more of the villainous side of John Walker, aka U.S. agent in the comics. We don't get as much as him as well as his best buddy Battlestar, but we'll talk about John a little bit later. But an interesting way to open up the episode with John Walker. But we cut to our main attractions, Bucky and Sam, as they're going to have a conversation with Zemo. But Bucky wants to have this conversation alone without Sam being there. And this is what I was waiting for, ladies and gentlemen. I mentioned in my review last week, as well as the discussion that we had on last week's live stream, Zemo is one of my favorite villains in MCU. And when I saw Civil War, I'm just like, oh man, you know, he's a little underwhelming. But the more I watch Civil War, and as the years went by, he's become one of my favorite villains for the simple fact that he actually got the job done. Very similar to Thanos, very similar to Killmonger. He was able to break the Avengers up. And it's really interesting to see this other side of Zemo in this episode, which we'll break down. But just seeing him first and foremost, telling Bucky, logging, rusted, 17, as Bucky says, those days are over. And Zemo knows this, but he was just testing to see where Bucky was at mentally. But as he tells Bucky in this episode, as we see in this episode, I think it's a facade, first and foremost, of him being this pseudo anti-hero-ish, being a part of the trio, which, by the way, Bucky, Sam, and Zemo, I love their chemistry. But nonetheless, he tells Bucky it was never personal. But, you know, he's done some things to kind of put some red ledger in his name, especially taking out T'Chaka, which we'll talk about the name drop and Wakanda's connections at the end of this episode. But he apologizes to Bucky, and Zemo sees the desperation that Bucky and Sam have. If you guys are talking to me, oh, you guys must be very desperate. As we see, Bucky wants to break him out of jail, which was a great sequence. I love when we have movies and shows when they tell you the plan and you see the plan on screen, and sometimes it doesn't ever happen, but in this case, as Bucky is telling Sam, I want to break him out, and we see it go down. It cut between Bucky telling Sam what he wants to do and it actually happening in action. And we see Zemo in action in this episode, which I think a lot of people forget that, you know, yeah, he didn't go toe-to-toe with the Avengers, but he was an ex-soldier. He used to work for this corporate or this kind of underground soldier, military soldier in Sokovia. So he has some hand-to-hand combat, and we see a lot of that in this episode. But we see him breaking out of jail, and then we see Sam being like, what have you done, Bucky? As they have the kind of buddy cop moment where, as buddy cop films sometimes have, they have to team up with the villain to take out the bigger villain, and that is very much the case in this episode. And we have to go meet Shelby, which we'll get into here in a bit. But going a little bit more into Zemo, which I thought his reintroduction to the MCU, being kind of this, again, anti-hero, which could set up the Thunderbolts, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But seeing him having his family backstory of having wealth and having all his toys, having his purple mask that he puts on later in this episode. But we get some back and forth with a little bit of the comedy that's thrown into this episode, which some of it worked, some of it didn't, which we'll talk about in this review. But we see that Zemo has Bucky's book, which I like that it actually is revealed that that was Steve Rogers' book, the same book that we saw in Winter Soldier, as Bucky tells him, tread lightly with this book that you have in your hand. They have a little moment talking about Trouble Man. The brilliance of that song, Marvin Gaye, is one of the greatest of all time. And my boy Steve Rogers knows that now with the help of Sam. But we get a couple name drops in this scene. One in particular is Red Skull, which just completely has nothing to do with this episode. But I'm just thinking to myself, I kind of forgot about Red Skull in regards to him being in Infinity War and Endgame. Now that the Soul Stone is released, is he released from the Soul universe? Is he somewhere out there in the MCU? Something to look forward to in the future. But we find out that we are going to be headed to Madripoor, which we also learn that Bucky will have to take on the Winter Soldier for side, which we'll get to that. But Madripoor is a very interesting name drop, considering that it is part of the comics, considering that Steve has a history there, as well as Logan, aka Wolverine. There's been a lot of rumors about X-Men making an appearance in this show. There are people getting experimented on. I don't know. We'll see. But cut to Karli visiting her sick mother who passes in the scene. And I'm not going to lie, this is the third week in a row. Whenever we cut to the Flag Smashers, it's just not hitting me quite yet. I understand what they're setting them up to be, almost, again, like we get with Zemo, this anti-hero. They're doing stuff, especially later in this episode that Karli does, they're doing stuff that it could be considered villainous ways. They're killing people, right? We see that in this episode, at least Karli is, but I still just, it hasn't hit me emotionally quite yet. Even though the show has given us these little breadcrumbs to make them more humanized, I'm just not connecting with the Flag Smashers. Let me know where you all are at with those groups of terrorists. Back to the crew with Zemo, and he mentions the town. There's High Town, there's Low Town, and we see them getting prepared to go to this club. And listen, this was my favorite part of the episode because I've been advocating, I want to see Bucky kick some ass. I'm tired of him doing his whole therapy. I don't want to do violence. Not in this episode, because we get the classic. I love the score. Whenever, to me, Captain America has the best score in the MCU and all the themes that comes with his movies, including Winter Soldier theme. We see Bucky in action, pretending to be the Winter Soldier in the club, taking out these men left and right. The music kicks in. He's kicking ass. That was my favorite scene because I love me some Winter Soldier. And we see they are now about to approach the meeting and meeting Shelby, which, by the way, I don't know if you all caught that Sharon Carter was actually in the club with them. She had her hood on. It kind of went by pretty quickly, but it kind of alluded to her being in this episode, which we'll talk about her in a second. But we see this offer being made that if you give me information, Zemo telling Shelby, I'll give you the Winter Soldier. He'll be your dog. He'll be your pet. And we get the information about the Super Soldier Serum, that it was created by a Dr. William Nagel, who is responsible for creating this serum, which we'll talk about him in a bit. But we see Sam's cover is broken because his sister calls, which I thought that was a kind of funny moment when Sam's pretending to be the smiling tiger, as his persona is in this episode. He says, hey, I'm going to kill that banker. I thought that was a really funny scene. But we see the action set piece this week of a sorts before we get to the crate fight that we have. But we see them get split up for a brief second. Zemo, I'm thinking, oh, Zemo's on the loose now. We're not going to catch him up. But he kept coming back to the crew, showing his value in this trio here. But we get this action set piece. We see Shelby is shot. I assume that she's off the table. And we'll see, if there's any, there are repercussions for the death of this Shelby character. And I think Sharon Carter is going to have to deal with that. Which, speaking of Sharon Carter, it's revealed that she is now in the mix. She sees that Zemo is back. The scene was cool because Sharon Carter, to me, and Winter Soldier, the nurse that was the next door neighbor of Steve Rogers, who was revealed to work for S.H.I.E.L.D. and all that stuff, and her fighting Winter Soldier with Natasha in Civil War. She's a cool character, but we haven't gotten that much from her, so seeing her back in the mix was nice. But The moment was a little undercut by me because she was just giving us exposition, like, where you been? Well, I've been doing this, that, and the third. It was a little weird how they kind of reintroduced her to the audience. That's just me personally, but I still kind of like her being brought back into the mix and having a little bit of an edge to her, which I really enjoy that. Seeing her calling out Sam and Bucky's belief in the government and being superheroes. I kind of like this heart inside of her. She's been on the run for the last few years and doing this underground, exchange with the people in Madripoor. So I kind of like this new version of her and this kind of edginess to this character as we get her having this way of getting back to America. There's another deal that's struck where Sam says, you help us out, I'll get you back to the U.S. We'll see how that plays out in the show. But we get the meme of the week, right? This show has been creating a lot of great memes, from Captain America being the guy from Up, and now we got my boy Zemo in the club dancing, which I know that's already going to be blowing up the internet. But nonetheless, we see them going to this meeting to meet Dr. Nagel. In this scene here, we see Sharon Carter kicking some ass, guys. Again, this was the exposition moment didn't really work for me as she's kind of catching us up to speed. I thought it could have been done a little bit more naturally, but seeing her in action, very hand-to-hand combat. Again, the writer of this show is the same writer of the 3 John Wick films, more recently with the Nobody movie, and the hand-to-hand combat with Sharon Carter was absolutely amazing. We see that there's a bounty coming from the incident from the previous night with the Shelby character. We finally get the conversation with the Dr. Nagel, who that actor to me wasn't really working for me in that scene. Very small little con for me in the episode, but he kind of tells him how he recreated the serum, how he perfected the serum, how he was gone for 5 years and brought back into the mix, and that he made 20 of the serums, and Karli has 8 of them. So she still has the serum in her possession, which means there are 12 vials of serum left. I'm looking at you, John Walker, Battlestar, and maybe some other characters. We'll see what happens with those other serums, or if they're going to be destroyed by the end of the show. But she hints that the power broker, that's why she got that text last week. It wasn't because she stole the equipment from the truck last week, is because she stole the 20 vials of the super serum. And we'll talk about who I think the power broker is here in a bit. But we see the explosion happen. The doctor dies. We get more of seeing Zemo in action. He technically saves Sam and Bucky with him getting in the car, him putting on the mask, taking out the guys. Again, Zemo was the MVP for me in this episode. We get even this really great callback to Civil War as Shannon says, I'm not going to go with you guys. Just make sure you hold the end of the bargain. And we see them in the car, and we see Sam in the back seat. He tells Bucky, "You're not going to move the seat up, are you?" And he says, "No," which is a great callback to Civil War. And honestly, that's where this show is based on that one scene, as well as them fighting Spider-Man later in Civil War. So I love that callback. But we get a backstory about Mama Danya, who again, this cuts back to the Flag Smashers, that, Mama Danya was someone that took care of the people that were during the blip and is kind of a safe haven. But obviously we see that she dies in this episode, which again speaks to Karli's motivations, why she wants to kind of do this doings that she's doing in this episode in this show. But again, it's just not resonating with me. But we'll see. There's still time to kind of grow on me with the Flag Smasher, but they're not quite working for me in the show. But Sam and Bucky have the conversation about the shield and what it means, and Sam goes again about not wanting to take on the shield. He actually mentioned that he should have destroyed the shield, which again speaks to him reconnecting with the shield eventually, inevitably by the end of the show, but having his version of what the shield means, especially after learning about Isaiah Bradley last week. We cut back to the Flag Smashers, my least favorite moments of the episode, but this had a little bit of resonance because we see Karli in action as they're taking these supplies, and she kills those men in the building. They were defenseless. They were tied up. She did not have to do that, but she's taken that extra step, which now it felt a little forced that she had to take that extra step to kill these men. She says the only way that they can hear us if we do actions like this. Again, it feels a little forced to make us be like, oh, they're bad people. We'll see. We'll see what happens with Karli and the Flag Smashers. But as we kind of wrap up the episode, Bucky, Sam, and Zemo head to Lafayette. We see that Bucky is noticing that there's these little tracking devices that have been following them. We see Bucky tracks the last little bead, and it is revealed that the Dora Milaje, the bodyguard of T'Challa, we get a T'Chaka name drop early in this episode, and it just, it never really dawned on me that Wakanda will have some type of doings within the show, but it makes so much sense because obviously Black Panther was introduced in Civil War. His dad died, T'Chaka. We can get introduced to the Dora Milaje and, T'Challa and all that, which that moment there was so awesome because we get I'll talk about themes earlier. We get the Wakandan theme with the Dora Milaje bodyguard there. I thought that was a great way to end the episode. And I think it's a great way to set up future Black Panther stuff, because obviously the Dora Milaje doesn't just do things on their own. They have to be given the command to follow Zemo with him being broken out of jail, which makes me beg the question, do we hear T'Challa's name be brought up in the coming weeks? Obviously, we know, rest in peace to the king, Chadwick Boseman, who played T'Challa in Black Panther. Will we get that name drop? Will Shuri appear in the show? Will there be, the other Dora Milaje characters in the mix? Will it be Nkoye? M'Baku? Who's going to maybe possibly appear in this show? But I thought that was a great tie-in because, again, it really ties into Black Panther. So it'll be really interesting to see where they go with that. But also, I think this episode does set the stage for Zemo because we see him in action, but also doing the anti-hero things. He's helping our heroes, doing some villainous stuff and behind the scenes, he's setting up some things probably, behind to kind of work into his advantage to make sure he doesn't go back to jail. But in the vein, Thunderbolts, man, I think that's why Black Widow was going to set the stage for that, being the first film in the MCU. Obviously, we know that film's coming out on Disney Plus and in theaters later this summer, but I think that's going to be setting up his arc to be potentially recruited by General Ross by the end of the show to be a part of the Thunderbolts, if not the leader of the Thunderbolts. But I mentioned a theory that I had in regards to this power broker who's the king of Madripoor, and I think it's not a coincidence that when it comes to Winter Soldier, Civil War, that the second AD happened to be Chad Kozlowski, who's the director of the John Wick films. We have the writer of all John Wick films attached to this episode, Derek Kolstad. Listen, I have no inside information, but listen, if we can get the power broker to be revealed to be John Wick himself, Keanu Reeves. Yes, I know it's an MCU show. You would love to see Keanu Reeves in a movie, which he could be, but wouldn't that be a great moment to see the power broker being revealed to be John Wick, aka Keanu Reeves? That's just my theory. That's just my thoughts in regards to the power broker. It probably won't be true, but again, that would be really cool if Keanu Reeves has some type of connection in this with so much John Wick isms within the Captain America universe. So there it is. That's my theory. That's my review. That's my breakdown. I really enjoyed this episode. Again, didn't have as much social commentary as the past two episodes. And I think episode 2 still might be my favorite regarding the dialogue and things of that nature. But this episode was fun. We got clubbing. We got Zemo dancing in the club. We got the Dora Milaje. We got Zemo in the mix again. We have Sam and Bucky. Their serum is still out there. Karli killing people now. So Sharon Carter back in the mix. I really enjoyed this episode. And I can't wait to dive deeper into it tomorrow, Saturday, 3 p.m., myself and my co-host, and potentially another special guest. We're going to break it all down for you all. Again, tune in tomorrow on this channel for the live stream. As always, make sure to like the video, share the video, leave your thoughts, your theories, your predictions in the comments. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit the bell. That way you don't miss any of my other content. I will be talking about Invincible Episode 4. Spoiler review will be coming Saturday morning, so keep an eye out for that. Hope you all are staying safe, and we'll see you on the next video.